Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the EV podcast. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning. We have lots of good information for you today.
These stories and more, as they say on 60 Seconds.
That's right.
First one, if we can throw up an image here, guys. Volta is the name of the picture or the image. And, this is a company in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden, that was making electric trucks even before the Cybertruck was released. And it looks kind of like the Canoo version of an EV. It's boxy, glass on the front, lots of glass. And it looked like it was off to a pretty good start. They apparently were using Proterra batteries, and that company filed for Chapter 11 some time ago. And now it turns out that Volta Trucks is also filing or possibly even going direct to insolvency. And we're not sure yet, right?
Yeah, we're not totally sure yet. These guys, their claim to fame is the box truck, basically. 13-ton, 26,000-pound trucks that could be used for deliveries or for small buses like what's pictured there. And when they lost their batteries, they lost their ability to manufacture, it appears.
Yeah. And they started producing in 2019, so it's a relatively new company. And their goal was to revolutionize commercial vehicle operations. They were the world's first purpose-built 16-ton all-electric truck. It has a unique cab and chassis design, and it definitely would have made some contributions to sustainable energy, especially in Europe. They were actually becoming visible and available in 5 different countries in Europe, and the feedback was fantastic, they claim.
Yeah, my understanding is that they had an order list that was more than 5,000 trucks that were on order from customers.
Back orders, amazing. So the board of directors has decided to close, and with lots of apologies, and apologizing to all of the vendors and the ancillary companies that will be affected by this insolvency proceeding. So anyway, hate to see them go, but it looks like once Tesla begins to ship their semis to Europe, it may replace some of this.
It may. My take on this particular one is that when Proterra went bankrupt and decided to go insolvent and shut their operation down, this is one of the companies that was most affected. They went from being able to manufacture to suddenly not being able to manufacture, and I don't know whether or not they're going to get through this bankruptcy.
Yeah. This is reminiscent of a similar truck that was being produced here in Tempe about a year ago. We became aware of an auction. It was actually one of our comm group customers,
right?
And we were building wiring harnesses for something that was about a third to maybe half this size, but looked almost identical, a lot of glass in the front. And we ended up going to the auction. We were retooling at the time, and I bought some machine shop equipment. We got a lot of power supplies. And it's always sad when you see these companies with noble intentions, a good product line, a solid future in a particular industry that just isn't able to handle the ramp-up time.
Yeah, most definitely.
And you know what they ended up doing with they had one vehicle left,
right,
in this shop or this small manufacturing facility in Tempe. And the guy that bought it, I started chatting with him. I said, well, so what are you going to do with this? He says, oh, we're taking this to Burning Man.
Oh, I wonder if that vehicle got stuck in the mud like so many others this year.
I'm not even sure it was drivable yet because it was one of the prototypes. But if it was, then yes. If not, they would have trailered it there. And
my God! Well, that's kind of what Burning Man is for, is all those really unusual and unique things that they do. On YouTube, Alternative Energy Aotearoa is back this morning. For them it's morning. It's Friday morning for them.
Yeah.
Kia ora from Aotearoa, and person waving. So good morning to you.
And here's a new one. Facebook, Ted Vogukala, Vogiuk I'm really trying to pronounce the name. I'm sorry, Ted. I'm just going to say Ted V at this point. He says, "Hello, my friend. I'm inside the airplane flying from Europe to New York and then Miami. I'll be there by 11 p.m." Well, this is the first, I think, someone watching our podcast while in flight.
That is probably a
Very
first,
cool.
yes.
Yesterday, we talked about people watching our podcast, unusual situations. Not only Paul Erickson, who watches while he's traveling on his screen in his Tesla, but we found out that some of the Tesla service centers actually tune in and watch our podcast. So we promised them that we'll be sharing more tech tips and talking shop a bit more, allowing them to chime in as well. Instagram, CH215714N says, "Hi, Sunglass Boys."
Well, good morning.
And if Richard was ready, he'd go into commercial mode, but he's not. So we'll do that later then. All right, guys?
Well, the camera's not on, but I can always, do
you
an
can
audio
ad-lib?
bit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, sunglasses, while you can't see mine, I do have them on. What you can't see is this sunglass case holder that I'm holding up. It is absolutely gorgeous.
You can see the one that I'm holding up.
That's right. You can look at that one, equally as gorgeous. Different color, though. These are available on our website for $79.99 unless you use code Richard or Aaron. You get 10% off.
Thank you. Instagram, Mahmoud Walid says, "Free Palestine." We spoke about that a little bit in the last podcast, and the story that we had was that Tesla Model 3 Performance that was riddled with 100 bullet holes.
Yes.
An injured driver who had sustained some gunshot wounds, but actually with the tires blown out or shot out, actually in this case, was able to get that thing over 100 miles an hour to escape. And he outran whatever vehicles they were using, which was, it sounded like small pickup trucks.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was a Toyota or an Isuzu. And he felt very lucky because he said they were shooting mostly at his trunk and at his...
At the engine compartment.
At the engine compartment and in the rear at what would have been the gas tank compartment, not realizing that this was a battery electric vehicle. And so he was able to take off and escape.
Yeah.
Our prayers are for both the Palestinians and Israelis that the conflict can be resolved soon with very little loss of life.
Yeah, this planet needs peace and a lot less killing. And,
yes.
Highlander is joining us, and Highlander actually has the perfect suggestion for this type of conflict, which is kindness is free.
Yes, kindness is always free.
Mm-hmm.
For this morning, he also says, "Mark the advertiser."
What are you advertising?
I'm being the Vanna White, of the sunglass cases.
He does a good job with that.
I see a hand modeling future career in your future, Mark.
YouTube, Kenneth Scott says the Tesla repair shops are 6 to 12 months out for body work. Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Depends on what territory you're in, I suppose, but. Yeah, it's the EV revolution is definitely disruptive in many ways, and the Tesla body shops actually are not owned by Tesla. That was the first attempt that Tesla did for outsourcing any services.
Mm-hmm.
And, it would have been very difficult for them to tool up, get the expertise in-house. To do body work is definitely a clear departure from fixing cars or fixing EVs at the level that, EVs need. So it was encouraging because it's the first time that we saw them outsource, which we believe is also going to happen in the EV independent repair shop space where we reside. And the fundamental reason is, if not Tesla first, it will be all the others, because we don't think that with their production goals and their costs to ramp up, it's much less expensive to outsource your service delivery.
Well, and we've seen multiple manufacturers take a route that's either a mix of independent contractors and internal manufacturing, or in some case, like in the case of Fisker, they're contracting everything. Their manufacturing operation is contracted either with the Lordstown plant in Ohio or with, don't remember off the top of my head, the plant that's over in Europe. And that is, I call them a mercenary plant because they actually manufacture for Ford, Volvo, Audi,
Right.
Mercedes, BMW. They have like 35 different models that they manufacture for a number of car makers.
It's called an agnostic manufacturer.
Yeah, just you know what? Just like we are over at Gruber Power Services.
And we've been following that business model actually for 40 years in our Gruber Power Services. When we first got started, we were offering service all across the country, nationwide, even out of the country. I remember going to Mexico myself on a field trip to fix a UPS at El Imparcial, which was the big newspaper in Mexico City. But anyway, the way that you can grow a company like this is by finding good quality subcontractors, offering your services, and then subcontracting those skills as needed.
Yeah.
And then eventually, when the spreadsheet says it makes more sense to put some boots on the ground there, then you switch over and you begin to throttle back on the contractor involvement or the subcontractor involvement.
Exactly. Richard.
Yeah, Pete, they're building up a Tesla collision center right by my house.
You're serious?
100%. And it's the Tesla logo and Tesla sign out front just went up not too long ago. It's off of 32nd and Union Hills.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah,
but it is branded Tesla, so maybe they're stepping into that space.
that would be awesome. Yeah. Of course, they'll probably transition and continue to use some of their subcontractor body shops until they get their operation up and running. Fascinating.
I would think that, and with the number of new Tesla cars that come out every single year now, I mean, Tesla's they've announced that they're going to put out 1.8 million cars this year.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough service infrastructure to take care of all the cars that are out there.
Yeah. And that's painfully evident in some of the complaints that you see on social media or when customers come to see us. YouTube Highlander, he says, agreed totally that we can outsource.
Sure.
So we got another news item here. Amazon reports receiving 10,000 Rivian delivery vans. And there's an interesting story here, apparently. It turns out that that Amazon has calculated they've already received 10,000 of these Rivian vans to date. And their delivery vans operate in 1,800 cities across the United States. They also estimate that these all-electric delivery vans built by Rivian have delivered 260 million packages nationwide. That seems like a lot, doesn't it? Yeah.
A lot of packages, although considering the number of packages that Amazon delivers in total, maybe not.
Yeah. And it looks like they're also expanding. Amazon is, they are launching these electric Rivian vans in Anaheim, Green Bay, Lexington, Silver Springs, and they are also operating, and I didn't bring this list with me because it was literally a mile long.
Sure.
All of the cities. Phoenix was one of them, by the way. We've got a big hub north here, and you'll see some of them. Now, apparently what had happened was Amazon ordered 100,000 electric delivery vans from Rivian. But then earlier this year, Amazon launched a Rivian delivery van in Europe, and it started depriving packages to customers in Munich, Germany. I don't understand what they're saying here. I'm actually reading this.
Yeah, and in March of this year, Rivian went back to Amazon because Amazon and Rivian have an exclusivity agreement. Rivian will make these vans for Amazon and for no one else. In return, Amazon will buy 100,000 vans from Rivian. Rivian wanted to get out of the exclusivity part of the agreent. They basically,
for obvious reasons.
they want to make vans.
Yeah.
Their vans are very successful. Rivian is gaining a really good reputation in the electric vehicle industry overall, partly because of these vans. And so they wanted to be able to sell these vans to UPS and FedEx and whoever else. And Amazon said, basically, my take is Amazon said, yeah, okay, we might not really need 100,000 of these, so maybe it is a good idea to renegotiate.
Right.
And then Rivian's like, whoa, wait a minute.
We changed our mind.
Wait a minute. Maybe it's okay. To me, they're saying Rivian's saying, look, we'll take the 100,000 guaranteed and worry about the rest of this later.
Right.
instead of having maybe 50,000 guaranteed and having to go and resell another 50,000.
So according to this article, the 100,000 commitment is back in play now, and turns out Amazon is agreeing to purchase all 100,000 of them. And we were talking earlier. If they had a stake in Rivian, which Amazon does, you would think they would be highly motivated to allow them to become profitable quicker. And I think of all of the companies that are making EVs, wasn't their cost or their loss per vehicle sold one of the lower ones?
For Rivian, it was one of the lower ones. There are 3 different makers that were losing in that $30,000 to $33,000 per vehicle range on EVs that they sell, and Rivian is one of those that they're losing about $32,000 per vehicle in the second quarter of 2023.
Mm-hmm. Got a bunch of comments here. YouTube, Ramon Hurt is joining us. He says Magna is making the Fisker.
That's the name.
That's the name.
That's
okay.
the name. Yes. Thank you, Ramon.
Nils Larson is with us. Oh, you've changed your name. Thank you, Nils. This way I'll be able to remember it. Yesterday, these guys were giving me a hard time. You called him 3 different names. You called him Niles, you called him Nils, and then some other variation.
Niels, which is the one.
Niels is the actual one you should be calling.
Yeah, Niels is
Niels. Okay.
Yeah, like somebody kneels onto the ground.
Okay, I will try to remember that. And the only reason I am confused, Niels, is because my grandfather-in-law used to work here, and his name was Niles, and he was from Norway. And but anyway, it was Nils, and his was the long version of that pronunciation. So what Niels is saying, morning, YouTube is attempting to defeat us devout ad blockers. So heading over here. No comment length limit either.
Yeah,
Really?
So that's supposed to say Facebook, not YouTube. He's on Facebook today.
Okay.
Oh, he's on Facebook today instead of YouTube. Okay. Well, Niels, welcome. We're always glad to have you and look forward to having your comments today.
Yeah. TikTok, false hopes. New viewer, perhaps. He says Rivian vans will change the delivery industry. Well, we certainly hope so. I was telling these guys yesterday, it's cooling down in Phoenix, but it's still, close to 100. And I'm sitting next to one of the big brown vans, and I look at the guy driving. He's got his doors completely open. He's seatbelted, of course. He has no air conditioning in that big brown box. Do you have any idea what Phoenix weather, direct sun with a dark brown van feels like in the middle of summer, without any air conditioning?
It's
an oven. Yeah.
It's miserable. In fact, it became a significant negotiating point between the drivers and UPS, because they're the ones that make the brown vans. And it was a point that UPS conceded that over the next, I think, 5 years, as they go in and update their vans and replace their fleet, they're going to replace them with a fleet of air-conditioned vans.
Yeah. Makes sense. Instagram, Krishna Paywar says, hello from Ohio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to this Rivian vans thing real quick again on false hopes, because he makes such a good point. Rivian vans, I do think, are going to change the delivery industry. And I think, and I had forgotten to say before, I think that's one of the reasons that Amazon wants that exclusivity so much. They have a competitive advantage having an electric delivery van that they can bring back to the yard and charge up for $1.50 and get another 100 miles on, as opposed to UPS that has these vans that get 5 miles a gallon.
Yeah. And of course, it will make their recruiting much easier, because they won't have to hunt for labor as vigorously as some of the other guys that don't have air conditioning in their vans.
Exactly.
Everybody's going to want to work for that nice electric air-conditioned van company.
So now, Ramon Hurt on YouTube has another questions for us. He says, are there any thoughts on the Canoo vans? They have a similar type deal with Walmart to make delivery vans.
Our Canoo expert here doesn't have a camera on him, but are you prepared to talk about it, Richard?
There's kind of a, love and hate relationship with Canoo, specifically with the investors. There's a lot of really hopeful things in the works, like their deal with Walmart and Kingpen. I think it was Kingpen or King B, one or the other. There's a few companies they have deals with, but those vans are I absolutely love them. I really hope they make it. Right now, the stock is rough. It's not. I'm not sure whether or not they're gonna come through, but I like them.
Well, and I know that we put out onto our Facebook public page. If you go to the Gruber Morning Show page, you'll see a list of the articles, and that usually from that list is what we choose our topics out of. And all of us, Jesse, myself, Richard, yourself, Pete, we're all contributing to this all throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
And Top Speed had an article earlier this week that is really heaping praise on Canoo for their electric trucks and saying that basically the title, I'm not going to go into the article much. We may talk about it at a different day. But the title says the Canoo electric truck is the ultimate overlanding vehicle.
Really? Okay.
And it was a very complimentary article to Canoo. So we have a lot of stuff to go over. Maybe I'll leave it up in case we run out of content.
And disclaimer, I do own Canoo stock, and I have a pickup truck pre-ordered.
Wow.
Okay.
How is your stock doing, by the way?
I don't want to talk about it, Pete.
Okay. Well, right now the tide is down, and they're all basically floating a bit low. Interesting thing about this Walmart connection that was pointed out by Ramon. My son works for Walmart, and he was telling me that they have converted some of their fleet over to the electric vans now, and it must be Canoo apparently. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that's commendable. I said, how's it working out for them? How do they like them? He says, yeah, they won't charge them, and they're always dead. So it looks like there's a learning curve associated with when they electrify.
Oh, yes.
Instagram, Krishna Prayar says, oh, we did that already. Hello from Hawaii, Ohio. All right. So here's something interesting that made the news this last week, or just a few days ago, actually. Apparently, there is a Ford relative within Ford that's at the executive level. His name is Bill Ford, and he is the great-grandson of Henry Ford. And I watched the video, and he made a compelling argument what is currently going on between the UAW strike and how Ford is reacting. And anyway, the UAW strike now has been going on for a month. And what Bill Ford did was he called for labor efforts to end before doing any more damage to the economy. So he's speaking in broader terms. Right. It's not just the existential threat to the U.S. automakers. He warned that these strikes could harm the automakers' ability to compete with companies like Tesla and Toyota. And he delivered these remarks Monday from the Dearborn, Michigan Rouge Complex. By the way, the Rouge Complex is a large Ford enclave there in Dearborn, Michigan. It a number of acres, 600 acres, I think, or something like that. And there's a lot of history there. But in these remarks, he is the great-grandson, of course, of founder Henry Ford, and he said that the auto industry is at a crossroads currently. Choosing the right path, he says, is not just about Ford's future and our ability to compete. This is about the future of the American automobile industry. And for those of you around in the last century, they went through a similar existential threat in the 70s. In fact, Sandy Munro just did a video where he spoke about that. Mm-hmm. He talked about union membership back then was 1.5 million. Then it dived to 180,000. In other words, unions started to become irrelevant, and because they weren't paying attention, the other auto manufacturers began to take over the U.S. auto market, which we're all fully aware of. I remember in the 60s, the majority of what you saw on the roads were built in Detroit, Michigan. So anyway, he said that it's about the future of the American automobile industry. The Rouge Complex, he said, is the crown jewel of a company that still believes that America matters. And he said, we could stop this now. We need to come together and bring an end to this acrimonious round of talks. You had some comments about that.
Oh, absolutely. I still think the UAW is operating with a very short-sighted view. The UAW is trying to make the argument of, hey, look at the last 10 years. the big three automakers in the United States, Ford, Stellantis / Chrysler, and General Motors, has made $250 billion in profit. We deserve our share. Well, the automakers have completely different language for their argument. Their argument is that they're looking forward 10 years instead of backwards 10 years. And they're saying, look at all of the billions of dollars we're going to have to spend in order to stay relevant. GM is talking about $50 billion. Ford is talking about a similar amount. Stellantis has not disclosed how many tens of billions of dollars they need to spend, but they know that it is in the tens of billions of dollars range. And they're basically saying, we don't have much money to share. These two arguments are being used against one another right now, I feel like. And it's the automakers going to the union saying, well, your argument isn't even valid because of our argument. And the union saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Until these two different parties can come to the table and acknowledge that the other side has a valid argument, even if they don't agree with it, I don't see anytime soon where there's going to be reconciliation between the UAW and the auto industry.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading this morning, $7.7 billion of economic loss
Impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
So far in the first month of this strike, and it's only going to get worse.
Right. There's an additional walkout that was unexpected, and usually when these negotiations are going on, there's some saber rattling, some threats made, some deadlines. This one was unexpected.
Yeah.
And again, this is not operating in good faith. This is fundamentally a holdup. And again, our view has been that the timing for any of this is the absolute worst ever, because any of these U.S. auto manufacturers are now under the gun to switch, pivot, and convert to EVs. And before any of this even started to boil, we were concerned that they were going to make it just based on the fact that they have to pivot and they don't have the infrastructure to do that.
Right.
Now we have this additional major burden, existential threat, basically. And very few people, I think, are optimistic about their survival capability.
Well, and I also think if you look back at the supply chain issues from the last 2 years as a result of the pandemic, the supply chain issues created a supply and demand imbalance. And the automakers, frankly, to a company, I think they took advantage of that supply chain disruption and subsequent demand and supply imbalance, raising prices, raising MSRP prices. That has nothing to say about the dealers taking their cut.
Right, yeah.
And now fast forward to where we are at the end of 2023, and it seems like the consumers are collectively saying, enough already.
Mm-hmm.
We can't afford these cars anymore at this price. And so demand, the term that I've been hearing used is demand destruction. The demand is going down. People are just simply saying, well, I just simply can't afford it. So I'm either going to fix my current car, I'm going to start taking the bus, I'm going to do whatever I need to do.
Yeah.
And until car prices start coming back down to an affordable rate, I can't do anything about it. Okay, guess what? UAW is going to force these car makers to have higher prices. Not unlike, Jesse was talking to us pre-show about the SAG-AFTRA impacts.
Yeah, Jesse, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I was talking about Netflix raising their prices. So Netflix was one of the first ones that caved to the SAG-AFTRA strike demands for the writer's strike. And within a week of signing this, historic agreement that everyone was cheering for, they're raising their prices 27% across the board for 250 million users. So I just thought that was ironic because a lot of the union rhetoric is, let's take the money from the CEOs or the board members. And the reality is it's coming out of the user's pocket.
Oh, yeah, it is affecting their neighbors rather than the people that Sean Fain says, we want to eat the rich.
Yeah, and when the market is already starting to struggle under the extra costs of things like interest rates,
Mhm.
this is not boding well for the auto industry overall, I don't think.
Yeah. Can we bring up a picture, guys? This is on a little happier note here. Bill Ford is the name of this image. And here you can see a picture of what Bill looks like. Bill is the great grandson of Henry, and he ended up buying the oldest Ford Model A recently for his grandfather's 150th birthday.
Oh, this one is such a cool story.
Mm-hmm.
I found an article on Yahoo about this, and it said that the story goes that this is one of three.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Ford in 1903 was struggling, and he was down to possibly his last few pennies, is how they're putting it. He was about to run out of money, basically. And he got 3 deposits from customers to build 3 Model A's. And so he proceeded to build those 3 Model A's, and that gave him the funding to continue building his cars. This is one of those 3 first Model A's.
Amazing. And if Ford survives, I would love to see this in their front lobby as a testament to one of their first generation cars.
I think, in fact, they are going to be putting it in a Ford museum for something, a purpose just about like that.
Now, did you notice the reason I phrased it that way? There was
I do.
a hint there for Elon Musk. We have 3 early first generation Tesla Roadsters, barn find, that would look great in the front lobbies of some of these gigafactories as the genesis of the creation of Tesla.
Yeah, I think they would look great. We're thinking Texas, Fremont, and Berlin, possibly.
And Berlin. Of course, there will be other factories later, but we'll find you more cars, Elon. Let's just get these 3 placed first.
Let's get these 3.
All right. So YouTube, Brad T is saying, what is going on in the auto industry as a whole regarding sales?
Well, we've been talking about that a little bit. And it's, right now the sales are softening. There's no 2 ways about it. We're going to go more into finances with Tesla in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And Elon Musk is simply the latest in a long line of people that are complaining about headwinds in the industry, and how they're increasing, and there are things that are causing the market to get softer.
Mm-hmm. YouTube, Brad T says, does the strike really just benefit the big 3 since sales were slowing over the last 2 quarters? I don't think the strike benefits any of them.
Don't either. The ones that I think get benefited most by the strike are the non-union shops.
Mm-hmm.
Nissan, Toyota, Honda. They all have large facilities here in the U.S. They're all non-union. They're all like, yeah, let's keep going, guys, because it's driving their competitors out of business. Tesla's another one that, in many ways, Tesla has been the elephant in the room for this entire thing, because the automakers and the union both seem to be focusing a lot on Tesla as the primary competition, and have 2 very different views of how they can meet that threat from Tesla.
Right. All right. YouTube Highlander, Billy Ford lives in Ann Arbor next to and near my sister. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Ramon, would AI be for or against the UAW?
That's a great question to ask.
We're human beings and we can get emotionally involved. And as you have pointed out many times, AI doesn't indulge in these kinds of emotions. So It's going to take a very practical view of this. And I think if AI were to weigh in, it would basically say a parasite usually doesn't kill the host.
Mm-hmm.
I do have something on that, though, on the AI.
Go for it, Cass.
I just did a basic lookup, and they're more focusing on AI doing data entry and stuff like that, stuff that's repetitive, and not stuff that would need like skills in hands. I mean, they will eventually, but they want to start with data.
Sure, what it does best, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have some milestones to reach yet, such as sentience and becoming aware of itself. And yeah. All right. It looks like Niels is chiming in from Facebook today. He says the Tesla Q3 call sounded like Musk is seeing the problematic future that Mr. Negative and others have been speculating about. His enthusiasm has evaporated quite a bit, or maybe he just had a bad day. You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because Mark and I were discussing that very thing. I didn't see it, but he did, and he said there was a different mood in this earnings call.
Yeah, there definitely was. In fact, this might be a good time to go into the information on the earnings call. Because Tesla obviously posted their earnings yesterday. They were less than expectations, 66 cents per share of earnings, as opposed to an estimate of 73 cents a share. Revenue also was a miss. It was $23.35 billion. And that was a miss of about $790 million. Analysts expected somewhere around $24 billion or a little over $24 billion. Elon Musk was more conservative in the way that he spoke. He said things like, look, this is a big ship, but even big ships get rocked in storms sometimes. He had that kind of a quote. And he highlighted some very specific challenges, such as there's rising interest rates. He really lamented the fact that there is no longer the 0 or near 0% interest rate environment that Tesla's enjoyed the last few years. He's talked about, for the first time, used the words production hell since 2018 when he was talking about the Model 3 going into production.
Right.
He said the Cybertruck is going to be Tesla's best product ever. He still says that, but he says they're going through production hell to try to get it to market. They did, however, announce officially that November 30th will be when deliveries start. That was good news. Elon Musk also talked about the wars abroad, the war in Ukraine, the more recent Israeli and Palestinian conflict. And he said, look, when the headlines are all about the wars that are being fought, it makes people afraid. People who are afraid don't want to buy cars. And so as of 9:45 this morning, Tesla shares were down 9.5% to about $220 a share. And this is hitting the wider EV market really hard as well. What it is that Elon is talking about a loss of demand in the marketplace as a whole. And it's one of the first, it was a fairly negative call in that sense. And yet his demand fears have been pretty well bolstered. In the last few days, Ford has announced that they're going to trim back one shift on their Ford Lightning plant. So instead of going, I think it was 24/7, our audience can correct me, but they're pulling back one shift. They're reducing production of the Ford Lightning, and they're saying it's demand problems. General Motors has announced a 1-year delay in the last couple of days of the production of the Chevy Silverado EV pickup truck. So now instead of coming out in the late 2024 range, they're talking about moving it back by a full year to late 2025. The reason? Demand. They're saying that there's less demand than what they had forecasted. Tesla is putting the brakes on a little bit on their Mexico factory. They're slowing down the construction process, saying that they're a little bit concerned about the demand that's out there for their cars, and they don't want to be overbuilt. Lucid has been hammered, right? Because they came out and said, oh yeah, yay us, we delivered 1,450 cars in the third quarter. And the investment community collectively said, say what? That's you're still saying you're going to deliver 10,000 cars by the end of the year, and you have only delivered 4,500 cars in 9 months. That's a long ways from 10,000. Although Lucid did say they've got 700 cars that have gone to their Saudi factory for final assembly. but that's not delivered cars.
Right. Right.
So there's a lot going on here in the demand area. Interest rates, to me, interest rates have been historically low. We have a generation of people who are used to 0 or near 0% rates. They've been low like this since the early 2000s. And while the rates might sting right now, interest rates are right now about where they have normally been over the last 100 years. The last 15 years has been historically low and unusual. People will eventually get used to the rates. They'll adjust. Life will go on. Demand will come back. The one thing that I thought was really interesting was the cost of goods sold per vehicle. Tesla said that their cost of goods sold per vehicle is down to $37,500, around there, on an average basis. That's obviously the lowest cost of any EV maker. And in fact, it's only $3,000, $4,000 more than the amount of loss that Rivian is taking, that Fisker is taking, so on and so forth in their sales. Most of Tesla's competitors are losing almost as much after the sale as Tesla has in total costs. And yet Tesla is very aggressively working to continue to cut their costs. Kudos to Tesla. I agree with that approach completely. You always be focused on figuring out what you can do to reduce costs and make something better for less, because then when the market comes back, you're going to be miles ahead of your competition. Notably, Tesla's cost reduction did catch the attention of people, because their profits only went down by about 1%, from like 18.9 to 17.9% for their gross profit. And that was notable because that means that the cost reductions are already paying back. They're selling cars for 25% less than they used to, and yet their profits are only down 1%.
Amazing.
That's what's amazing.
It's what's called a well-run company.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that I found interesting as a takeaway, they said that, of course, Tesla announced that Cybertruck deliveries will start in November 30th now, and they've already deployed production capacity for 125,000 trucks per year. With a backlog, that puts them on a 16-year track to fulfill just those orders, not even the new ones that are coming in after they begin releasing trucks.
Oh, I know.
So that production ramp definitely has to grow quickly, or we're going to have some annoyed customers.
Well, I think that's part of what Elon's concerns have been with why he calls it production hell. And he did also say within a year that they believe they can be up around 250,000 Cybertrucks per year. But even that is an 8-year backlog.
Right.
And how many people are going to wait 8 years for their vehicle? Not very many.
Well, except for the Tesla Roadster number 2 customers that have been waiting for a long time.
So I'm saying we've already been waiting 6 years or whatever.
They're already waiting. They've already been waiting, in some cases, 8 years, and they're still going to wait.
YouTube Highlander, he says, we are really starting to feel the strike in Toledo, Ohio. He says, everybody, that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah.
It's a volatile subject. I agree with you. YouTube Lightning Rod says, howdy from Thunder Bay, currently 11 degrees centigrade and light rain. Niels is commenting. He says, out of Ford's production cost, how much is the salary percentage-wise? 6 to 7%, right? So how can a salary increase of 30% damage Ford's sales much? You're the financial guy. What do you think of that one?
Well, hold on real quick. They're asking for 40%, in some cases more than that, and they're also asking for up to 25% reduction in hours as well. They're not just asking for 30% pay increase.
Yeah, and it looks like I'm doing a quick AI look here to help answer Niels, because there is something to that. I see that in our company, especially in our communication products where we manufacture goods. when the state of Arizona had in 2018 a minimum wage increase. They passed a law that increased the minimum wage from the federal minimum wage, which was $7.15 or $7.35, up to $12 all at once. And that was, that's like a 60% raise for the lowest earners. And so we buffered. We saw that the law was coming in. We buffered that by giving people raises, step raises over a couple years so that we could appropriately price our products and not shock our investors, our customers. And our labor cost runs anywhere from 30 to 50% of the total cost of our product. So even seeing a 60% labor increase by getting to our sales team, getting out in front of it and going to them, it wasn't bad. We didn't see a drop in sales.
Because we had a rollout basically, and we prepared the customers, and we were able to maintain market share.
Exactly. We were able to maintain market share. We passed our costs along to the customers. Now, Niels has a great point here. If the salary to build a car is only 5% of the total of that car, and I don't know, I'm trying to verify that number. It looks like it's not too far off. Okay, now let's say we go from 40 to 32 hours and the salary goes up by 40%. We had at one point calculated it would be overall maybe as much as 100% cost increase in labor. Well, what's 100% increase of from 5%? That means it's now 10% of your car. That means your $50,000 car is now maybe if a $50,000 car had $2,500 in labor, now you have a $52,000 car or $53,000 car.
Right.
So with the kind of margins that the companies have had over these last 2 years, my hope is that they'll be able to absorb at least some of these additional labor costs, and they will also pass on some of them to the consumer.
So it'll be a combination of things. YouTube, Ramon Hurt says, last time I was at the Fremont factory, they already had a Roadster on display. It's not in the lobby, though. Well, that's great news. Yeah, there's one at the Massachusetts Service Centers, one of them as well. We had the VIN here in the Roadster podcast.
And I don't remember right offhand.
And in recent conversations with Tesla Corporate, they are making a commitment to save some of the Roadster buybacks that they're doing. And they buy these for parts, basically. But the really pristine ones, they're setting aside, and their plan is to put some of these into the service center locations on display.
Oh, okay.
YouTube Highlander, he says, yes, I agree with Mark. The local Tesla suppliers, they love it.
Yeah. YouTube Lightning Rod says, there's a different mood right now all around the world. If you think the climate collapse is real, that is. The charts this year are literally detached from reality of the current dialogue regarding it. Some people even speculate that it is like a regime change. Good luck, friends.
Wow. It's that last comment that scares me. Good luck, friends. Are you going to be going on a spaceship and leaving the planet behind? Joining Elon on Mars, perhaps? That would be one way to avoid all of this.
Where can I sign up?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
YouTube, Richard Flinke, he says, Ramon, don't buy Canoo. They sold out warrants to special class holders, diluting the stock. Well, there's some stock advice for you, Richard.
Pete, I just looked at it. It's down 9% today.
Really? Well,
that's rough.
Yeah, they're all sinking. YouTube, Lightning Rod, he says, Aptera equals, in all caps, winner.
I think that's in response to 91 Kit on YouTube, who says, have you heard about Aptera? They're progressing with their solar car in Carlsbad. And yes, we have heard about Aptera. We're huge Aptera fans. We'd love to see them actually come out with their car and get it going.
To borrow a stock market phrase, we are bullish on Aptera. YouTube, Ramon Hurt, when the UAW is asking for a 32-hour week, they really just want to start making overtime after that. These companies' workers, their employees, way more than that every week. Most times there is mandatory 10-hour days or 6-day work weeks.
Oh, Ramon has a good point there that I'd never thought about before.
But that's still even worse than
It is.
than
Yes.
the 30% or 40%, because that means
It compounds
they're
the problem.
they're gonna compound the 40% increase in income.
Yeah.
That makes it worse.
It does, Jesse. I agree, and because a labor agreement supersedes federal labor law. That's the way that the Department of Labor is, the labor laws are written. So, for example, I'll take flight attendants. My son was a flight attendant for a couple of years. And he said, yeah, we might work 14-hour days, but we're paid from the time the door closes until the time the door opens on the airplane. And if that time that door is closed inside the airplane is 4 hours of the 14 hours, then I get paid 4 hours for the day.
Really?
Even though I worked 14.
Yeah.
Well, so this is UAW saying, yeah, we're only going to work 32 hours. Okay, well, do the automakers try to find highly skilled workers who can work a second shift of 32 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they say, you know what, we're going to do the numbers. It's probably cheaper for us overall to keep these workers on and let them work overtime. Well, for them, if they negotiate successfully to 32 hours, then anything over 32 hours is overtime.
Time and a half. Yeah.
Time and a half or better.
Yeah, during holidays even. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lightning Rod says, LOL, I'm in the smoking lounge of my space condo right now. So, headline here, Tesla full self-driving beta program reaches 500 million cumulative miles. I found this one interesting because in our AI podcast, we spent some time a couple of weeks ago talking about the new direction Tesla is taking with their full self-driving. And it's been a slog writing code for all of the variations that a car would see on the road, identifying the shape of signs, and then writing rules how to accommodate that, staying within the lanes, who gets to the stop sign, who goes first, that type of thing.
Right.
And it was literally hundreds of thousands of lines of code in full self-driving. They finally switched that and decided to just simply use AI and to start mimicking their drivers, their best drivers. And they were very selective. They didn't just pick the run-of-the-mill. So, and as we had speculated, who else on the planet is gathering data at the rate that Tesla is, driving data?
Yeah.
With all of the sensors that they have and cameras and all that. So they're perfectly poised to, they're positioned to utilize this mimic driving for full self-driving rather than rule-based or, code-based.
Yeah, so that heuristic driving, I decided to throw some numbers out here for some perspective too. We do our broadcast out of the Phoenix, Arizona metro area. We're up in North Phoenix. Now, the Phoenix metro area has about 5 million people in it. There are over 1 million cars. In fact, I did a quick look up. In the state of Arizona, there are 2.4 million registered cars, and Phoenix is about half the population of the state. But I'm going to keep with 1 million because it makes the numbers easier. According to the Maricopa County Association of Governments, the average daily drive for somebody in Maricopa County, which is where Phoenix is at, is about 37 miles.
Okay.
So that's 37 million driven miles per day.
Mm-hmm.
To get to 500 million miles, that's about 2 weeks of driving.
Amazing. Okay.
And so let's apply this now over to Tesla. Tesla has made 1.8 million cars this year. They made 1.5 million cars last year. Every one of these cars probably is gathering data for Tesla, even if the cars are don't have full self-driving installed. So now instead of 1 million, that's 3 million cars. Instead of 14 days or a little under 14 days of driving, now we're talking about 4.5 days of driving to get 500 million miles. That tells me that, yeah, you've got people that are absolutely curating all these miles. And when they say they're getting the best, yeah, they might be getting like the top 10% of drivers
Mm-hmm.
to get to this.
So we can see where full self-driving is going to be very successful. This seems to have been panning out for them.
Yes.
A few more questions. He says, YouTube, Ramon Hurt, that overtime pay will balloon after the raise. Of course.
Yep.
The question is, how much does Sean Fain benefit from all this? If he's making $250,000 now per year, how much will he make if the UAW gets their way?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we don't know how much Sean Fain is making, and the union leadership. I want to not just call out Sean on this. You can bet that the union leadership has dollar signs in their own for their own personal fortunes in all of this, because they believe if they can get the best deal for their membership, not only do they stay on the job a lot longer, the union membership increases and they all get nice fat raises.
Mm-hmm.
They become the people they want to eat.
YouTube, Richard Flenke. Welcome, Richard. He says, wait till Texas starts busing border crossers to Detroit. Right?
Oh, yes.
Hey, guys.
Yeah.
Can I ask a devil's advocate
Sure,
question?
Aaron.
Is there any good that's going to come out of the UAW for the workers?
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
short term,
for-
absolutely.
For the workers, sure.
Yeah. But we're talking long term. Are they going to have jobs? I mean, if you kill the host, your food supply is gone.
Yeah, it just seems like everything is focused around long term, and then on the other side, it's all focused on short term. But it just feels like that more and more information comes out. It's all bad for the workers because eventually they're going to be out of jobs.
Precisely.
Yeah, there'll be a subset of the workers who win big. They are going to be the either top performers or most senior workers.
Mhm.
They're the ones that will survive whatever rounds of layoffs there might be, because if everybody's laid off, you don't have a company anymore. There are going to be a lot of workers that are going to get just a short-term benefit, but long-term they're going to be pushed out. They're going to be pushed either to a non-union plant, or they're going to be pushed out of the industry overall. There are going to be a lot of suppliers that lose on this. They're already losing on this because the strike has disrupted the demand cycle for all these suppliers, and there are hundreds of suppliers that are out there wondering how they're going to feed their employees. And some of those suppliers have already gone out of business, and there are more of them that will go out of business.
And then, of course, we have the inevitable government bailout during deficit spending, which we all end up paying for companies that are going to collapse anyway.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to repay their debt, like Tesla did years ago, where they actually repaid their government debt.
Right.
GM didn't.
Ford, Stellantis, Chrysler didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So Ramon has a good comment for you as well, Aaron. He says, line workers aren't long-term thinkers. That's why they plan their lives around a factory job.
Good point. Niels, he says, full self-driving. It sounds like you are mixing seeing and acting regarding rules. No question, detecting the surroundings can be done with neural nets. But I don't think the driving ever can be 100% because there are traffic laws that must be obeyed. And those laws differ a lot from country to country and even state to state. This again means that Tesla must maintain many different trained versions, which is clearly wrong. For driving, there has to be more rules, not fewer in my opinion. But that's not endless work. That's just encoding traffic rules once and for all. Perhaps like the prologue, facts, and rules we did in the old days.
I'm not sure what to say back to Niels on this one. It's, what we're hearing is that Tesla has gone completely to the heuristic side. and they have deleted all 300,000 plus lines of code that's rule based. To me, that does not sound logical, because Niels has he's got a great point. I'll use one example. In Arizona, a right turn on a red light is legal unless there's a sign that says no turn on red. There are other states here in the United States where a right turn on a red light is not legal under any circumstance.
Right.
So how do you put that into a heuristic algorithm?
GPS location.
But that's and I don't have a good answer for that. GPS location might be it, but by definition, if you're using a GPS location, you've just added a rule.
So let's go a step further and go really futuristic now. Will we really need traffic laws when the machines do all the driving?
No.
Okay, that's a simple answer, right?
No. You don't need stop signs.
Yes.
You don't need traffic lights.
Right.
You don't need the yield signs. You don't need crosswalks. You don't need any of that stuff, because all of those things are rules to regulate drivers of traffic. And if machines are doing all of the driving and it's all AI based, at least in theory, all of that can go away.
And we will no longer need traffic cops.
Correct.
That made these guys happy back there, I think. Thank you, Niels. That was a very insightful comment.
Highlander on YouTube says, wait until you look up what the young lady who's running the AFL-CIO makes. I'm running toward the high defense industry. You guys know I've got the credentials to get it done. I did not know you had the credentials.
Interesting. Okay.
And I don't know how much the person who runs the AFL-CIO makes.
I looked it up.
Yeah?
16.7 million.
Oh, yes.
Staying with that thought for a moment, I thought perhaps with all of this acrimonious, these issues going on with the auto workers and the UAW, and one of the major positions is, well, these guys have had years of profits and it's time to share. It would be a symbolic act, but I would like to have seen one of these execs, Mary, for example, give back something and reduce her salary. It's not the first time that, CEOs have done things like this. Elon, for example, worked for $1 a year.
Yeah, Lee Iacocca in the 80s.
Yeah.
Chrysler was on the verge of not only bankruptcy, but dissolution. They were gonna go out of business and not be bailed out. Lee Iacocca comes in and he says, well, the first thing we're going to do is cut some costs. And the first cost we're going to cut is me.
Right.
And I'm going to take $1 a year. He was kind of the pioneer of that $1 a year idea, but it sent a message to the company and to the industry that they were serious.
It was an example of true leadership.
It really
was.
was.
An example. Yeah. Unfortunately, none of that has occurred, and it would be symbolic. It wouldn't make a bit of difference in the cost picture of any of it. But again, if we're going to have them negotiate in good faith, I think those kinds of steps would begin to heal this process that's currently broken pretty badly.
Yeah.
And Pete, I did a little math, just basic math on, say, somebody making $25 an hour on a standard 40-hour work week. Reducing that down 32 hours, getting 8 hours of overtime pay, increasing by 40%, it ends up being a total of 54% increase per employee, which is
substantial.
A lot.
Yeah. Without any additional increase in skills or contribution. In fact, a reduction in contribution, if anything.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's not like this is going to instantly create a bunch of additional UAW workers. It's still going to be the same amount of production. The same work is going to be happening.
Yeah.
I did find as well the typical labor cost for the sticker price of a car. This goes back several minutes to one of Niels' questions. Here in the United States, our big three are about 15% is the labor cost of the MSRP price.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that would mean if your labor cost doubles, then your overall car price goes up 15%.
Okay. We've got a bunch of things. Let's get through those, and I've got an interesting for you here on the 3 Chinese Roadsters.
Okay, yeah.
People like hearing about that. YouTube Highlander, he said, like I said, it's starting to get nasty in Toledo, and it's going to get nasty everywhere. I've been doing this all my life.
I'm concerned that you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Ramon Hurt says, Pete, you really need to look up Jacques Fresco. Rest in peace. You share a similar mindset with him.
Well, thank you. I will look that up. Yeah, thanks for the tip.
Yep. And then Niels on Facebook says, I disagree regarding no traffic rules. What about pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcycles, which will never be AI driven? They would get in the way, wouldn't they? Niels, that is a good point. If the other change in order to eliminate rules is that you're going to have throughways for automobiles that do not allow not only bicyclists or pedestrians, but no motorcycles as well. You cannot have any human traffic at all.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting how this all evolves. And it looks like it's going to be in our lifetime.
Yeah.
YouTube Highlander, I will follow your advice, Ramon. YouTube Highlander, also no right turn on red. It's un-American. Lots of laughs.
Oh, yes. And Richard Flenke on YouTube, Lee Iacocca, a Lee Iacocca quote he gave us.
Yeah.
It says, in the end, all business operations can be reduced to 3 words: people, product, and profits.
Yep. And if you're missing any of those, you don't have a company.
Yep.
So we've got a picture here, guys. PPF remove. The 3 Chinese Roadsters are currently going to be listed separately out on the Gruber Motors Roadsters for Sale site. And what we're finding is that the cars have a lot of PPF damage from sitting inside sea containers. And the speculation from one of our PPF experts actually in Texas is that the reason for this PPF degradation, which we typically do not see on cars of this age period that come into the shop that have had PPF applied in 2010, is the severe temperature cycling that is going on in these sea containers. Now, we have over 6 sea containers here in our facilities, maybe more than that even. And during the middle of summer, what you essentially have is an oven. You've got steel. The roofs are generally on those steel, but they've gotten dirty over the years, so it's not pure white, or it may be painted the color of the original sea container, which is gray. Got a blue one, actually. But they absorb an enormous amount of heat, and when you go into one of these, it is literally an oven. And what this PPF expert said, he speculated that these sea containers might have seen temperature extremes from 140 Fahrenheit during the middle of the day or the hottest part of the day, down to possibly even freezing, being on the eastern coast of China at times.
Right.
So he also described a process to us, which I'm going to defer to Mark here regarding what carbon fiber does under temperature extremes.
Oh, yeah. He was talking about carbon fiber itself and how the fibers in carbon fiber shrink as they get hotter. That is true. And then it's the material inside the carbon fiber, the resins and stuff like that, that will expand. While his point was that you end up with a ripple on a clear coat carbon fiber, the carbon fiber itself is a desirable material because manufacturers will blend the product that expands, the resins and stuff like that, with the fibers which contract, and you end up with a size stable product regardless of temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be in some applications, like we talked about yesterday, the big airlines that are making their fuselages with carbon fiber. It's not only lighter, but because it doesn't expand or contract, it causes a lot less stress on some of the other components in the airplane.
Hmm. So the this particular carbon fiber was on painted surfaces. I'm sorry, PPF, paint protective film,
Mm-hmm.
and it had cracked. It sometimes the adhesive would crystallize, and in worst case scenarios, it would bond with the clear coat, and now you needed to remove paint in order to remove the PPF. The picture that we have here, though, shows the worst of the 3 Tesla Roadsters. This was the worst PPF. It was flaking. You can see behind the arrow there, those were clear carbon fiber hood vanes. They're yellowed, they're cracked, and delaminating. What we ended up doing was, since this was the worst Roadster and it has a bit of dimpling on the front bumper, so we knew there was a repaint that was going to be required on this one, we used a more aggressive pressure washer on this. And we began to realize yesterday, actually, that the PPF actually could be removed by using this pressure washer method. And whatever remained, like those cloudy areas,
Mm-hmm.
were actually adhesive that were a tad sticky. So what we're doing now is dialing the correct chemical to use to remove the adhesive, and the flaking, of course, initially being removed by the pressure washer. So it's possible that this PPF, deteriorated PPF, may be able to be removed without any kind of damage to the body.
Oh, that's wonderful news to find out. And I know you had a PPF expert in a few days ago, correct? To look
Mhm.
at these cars. What kind of conclusions did he have for us?
They had never seen anything this severe.
Okay.
That was that was clear, and it was most likely because these cars were subjected to extreme temperature cycling. But his suggestion was there isn't a PPF removal company that's going to take this on a flat rate because there's so many unknowns.
Because it's the worst that they've ever seen,
Yep.
because it's cracked. They don't know if
It's time and materials.
it's just going to be time and materials. Well, I guess it would be more worth our time and materials than to do it than to hire somebody else.
Right, exactly. So what we're currently doing is the 3 Roadsters now have been broken up into 3 separate cars. The third one is going out this morning at some point. Lots of pictures showing the condition of the cars inside and out. And we're not proceeding with any remediation other than this one Roadster where we, as an experiment, started to remove some of the PPF. Our thinking is, since these are collector cars, there's going to be a wide range of preferences. Some collectors might say, these are so rare, I want them left exactly as is.
Right.
And then others may want certain levels of repairs, remediation. There was some rodent damage, so there's some wiring harnesses that need to be repaired. And then, of course, the PPF as well. There's some clouding inside the headlights, which is not abnormal because there are rubber cups in the back, and moisture eventually migrates through the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to create a quote list with each of the cars that stipulate what we recommend is necessary to bring this car to like new condition. And then the prospective bidders can decide, not only what the current state is, but what it would take and what costs are involved in bringing it back to 100%.
Sure. One person might decide that they want to have, for example, the wire harnesses replaced. That's an age type of unit, component on the car that would not really detract from the value if it was fixed.
Mm-hmm.
While somebody else might say, I want all the PPF taken off. I want the paint restored, whatever is necessary. Well, your paint restoration. Now, I'm gonna give deference here to our paint specialist, Ramon. He's a master.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that, somebody might come back and say, no, I don't want that. I don't want that extra paint restoration done.
And it also depends, in my view, on the eventual application or where the car is going to be stored, displayed, or what its function becomes. Take your average museum. A car like this would not be driven. It would sit there and look pretty. In that scenario, you wouldn't be concerned about any deferred maintenance inside the chassis, the wiring harnesses, for example. all you'd want to do there is make the outside look spectacular and like new.
Yep, exactly.
And then, of course, there's always going to be that wild card customer that says, you know what, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to put it back on the road.
Yeah, and then one of the bidders, I know at least one of the bidders.
Yeah, the highest bidder the last time
had been talking about doing exactly that.
And then, of course, every time you take it out for a drive, you do the math and you realize you've lost $50,000 to $100,000 every time you've taken it out.
Of course. You know, did you remember about a month ago, maybe a little over a month ago, we talked about a Model Y that was crushed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
in China.
Yeah, it was in China. In fact, Jesse, if you could pull up that particular picture, I think it's called Crushed Model Y in the images folder. I think I have it there in the images folder.
There isn't one in
there isn't one
for today at least.
Okay, I'll see if I can find that and get that moved over. This was if you guys recall, this was a pink Tesla Model Y. A wall had fallen on it and on 4 other cars parked along that side of the street. The other 4 cars were flattened. They looked like they had been through a car crusher. The Model Y, the cabin was still intact, testament to the Model Y itself. The front was obviously crushed. The rear, where the window was, the window had been broken out. And that poor person was called at the time the unluckiest Tesla owner in the world.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, the story goes that a young lady owned this pink Model Y in China, and this was the 4th major incident that had happened to her Model Y, none of them being her fault, in the first 4 months that she had owned it, and she had owned it about 4 months. Well, there's a good ending to this particular story. Tesla heard about this, and they replaced her Model Y for her.
For free.
Absolutely for free. So now she's being called possibly the luckiest Model Y Tesla owner in the world, because she got a free enhanced Model Y, one of the first ones that rolled off the line in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And she also, of course, from the owners of the wall, got full insurance reimbursement for her old Model Y. Mm-hmm. So now she's sitting on several $1,000s in cash, as well as a brand new car.
Mm-hmm. Bravo, Tesla! It was the right thing to do. We're impressed.
Very much so.
YouTube Highlander says Gruber podcasts are always so informative. Well, we're glad you're enjoying them.
Thank you.
We have an announcement to make. We're going to be altering the schedules next week, starting next week. What we're going to start doing is Mondays, we're going to have our communication group podcast.
Yes.
And they're only on their 3rd one, so this is fairly new. What we found is that we needed to compress these podcasts a bit in order for us to stay sane, because we have so many of them going on now.
That's right.
So Monday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time will be the COM Product Podcast. And any of you, of course, are welcome to join those.
That's on the COM channel.
On the Gruber Communications channel on YouTube, yes. And eventually we'll be streaming on all the other platforms as we get enough subscribers to do that. The change that's going to occur for you guys that are watching these podcasts is we won't be doing 2 of them, Tuesday and Thursday anymore. What we're going to do is combine the Roadster podcast, which is Wednesday, with the 2 Tuesday and Thursday podcasts, and we'll most likely run a little bit longer, especially if we have engagement. So we're not going to leave anybody high and dry, but what we don't know yet is how the Roadster community is going to accommodate this change, because at times there are some differences between the 2 different EV platforms. We'll try to make it work, and if it doesn't work out well, we'll go back to a separate Roadster podcast.
By all means.
So Tuesday, it will be this type of podcast and some Roadster podcast. And then Wednesday, we're going to do the Artificial Intelligence podcast, which is something Jesse and I have been doing Sundays normally. And then Friday, different team comes in and they do the Gruber Power Services podcast. So For those of you that are interested in continuing to participate in this podcast, it's going to be Tuesdays from now on at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we'll try to give it more time as well so that we can squeeze everything in. YouTube, we've got some comments here. Mansync 5 or Mansin 5, okay? Is there possibility to read the cell voltage of a battery with Toolbox 3? With the MCU1, you could read it via the factory mode. How are you doing it? Thanks for answering. You know, I am not the guy that does the later model versions, and our team over there would do that. If you want to send that question to ev@gruber.com, I'm sure someone there will chime in and give you some data.
I've worked a little bit with Toolbox 3 with some of our Model S's. And there are, it's not at the cell level, it's at the brick level, but we do get brick voltages on the Model 3 through Toolbox 3. So once we'll use that tool that gets us the brick voltages on the Model 3, on Toolbox 3 with the Model S, to identify bricks that have low voltages. And then from there, we'll go into the battery pack. And that once we've identified what module and brick, just like we do with the Roadsters, and then do testing of individual cells to find the resistance.
And you know, our guys over there are, before we had Toolbox, we had to use black screen Linux. So there was a degree of hacking involved. One of our guys uses a Raspberry, for example, with some of those hacking tools on it.
Yep.
And then we have another version that's on laptops for the Tesla Roadster. So it's a variety of software packages that we use to do diagnosis and troubleshooting. Question from Highlander, is Gruber Motors starting to take on other manufacturers' EV needs? We get requests for that, but at this moment, no. We're so busy with Roadsters, we're beginning to clear our Model S backlog to a modest extent, and we're trying to just simply get caught up at this point. We also have an EV manufacturer that is requesting that that they outsource some of their service needs to us, and that's happening, I think, the end of this year. So eventually, I see that as a clear path for us, that we'll have different EV brands that will be coming to our service center. But at this point, it's exclusively Tesla.
I know that we continue to be in growth mode for that, trying to hire and get the right guys trained.
And Pete?
Yeah.
I have a little more union info if you want some numbers. This is just basic math that I'm doing just on some Google searches, but there are 380,000 UAW workers, for example. Let's say that all of them, the average wage is $28 an hour across the organization, the union. If, say, all of them get a 54% increase, that would take the annual cost of the employment from $22 billion to $34 billion. So even if we cut that by a third and only talk about the 100-something thousand that apply to the big three auto manufacturers, if all three of the CEOs gave up their salaries, it wouldn't even cover the cost change for 3 days.
Interesting. Yeah.
And we're talking about all three of them combined are about $75 million. Wouldn't even cover the cost change for 3 days of employment.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it kind of, it's not a strong argument, and it would be a symbolic act to simply help at the bargaining table. It looks like YouTube. Ramon Hurt says, I enjoy this show because it's guys that not only own EVs, but actually work on them and are very knowledgeable. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast reminds me of EVTV, Jack Ricard. You're right, on YouTube. Jack Ricard, rest in peace. He was awesome. You know, he had a particular style, and you really had to be interested in the subject matter because there was no entertainment.
Right.
It was cut and dry, highly technical, lots of charts up behind him. And but he was one of the godfathers in the EV world. And thanks for pointing that out, by the way.
Well, that's a huge compliment. We really appreciate that. Highlander says, thank you, Ramon. And then Richard Flanky on YouTube says, hear, Ramon. I loves Jack Ricard. I still got all my EVCon shirts.
Yeah.
And then Doug Platten is joining us this morning and says, "Good morning, Gruber Morning Show." Good morning, Doug.
Doug, are you getting the rest of the guys at Peoria to watch these too? Let us know.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Ramon Hurd on YouTube says, "Jack Ricard made tons of money on Tesla stock."
He saw the light. He saw the opportunity. YouTube Manson5, he says, "Thank you. I really appreciate it." And then YouTube Highlander, he says, Go Gruber Power Team. You usually watch our GPS podcasts.
Yeah, good team there.
So that is our new podcast schedule. And again, we'll see how it works out. Oh, another item. It looks like we may be getting shirts. We had a customer that requested one, and Victor said, "Well, I've got a whole box of them. I'm going to silk screen them this weekend." And what you'll end up with is a shirt that looks like this. There, I guess we can see it better that way.
Ah, okay. That's great news. I know we've had a few people over time ask for shirts, and I'm sure that we'll have one or two shirts that go out to some of our listeners as well.
Well, we thank everyone for joining us as always. We're having as much fun as you are, and we will let you know the schedule again next week, and we'll see you Tuesday then if you're tuning into this EV podcast.
Monday is the Gruber Communications show, 10 a.m. And on Friday, we will have the Gruber Power Show. So take care.